Well, hey, you guys. Welcome back to Tomes of Terror. Once again, it's my book review series. So, some of you guys might remember that a while back, it's probably like several months ago or something like that, I reviewed a novel that came out in 2022 that was called The 666 Murders. This is by a British author named Alan Golbourn, I think is how you pronounce his last name. I apologize if that's not right. I enjoyed it quite a bit with some caveats. If you want to go back and watch that review, you'll see what, so a couple of the small issues I had with it. But recently, the same author contacted me again and offered me a review copy of his latest novel, which is called The Cult from Beyond. So I was very happy to accept it. Now, this book is actually his third full-length novel, I believe. His first was called Famuli Cani, I guess I'm pronouncing that sort of correctly, which he also sent me like a long time ago, and I'm very sorry that I haven't got around to reading it yet. Like I said, I have this huge pile. So there's that. But this book, The Cult from Beyond, that he sent me this time, is actually a sequel to the 666 Murders. Sorry, can't talk today. You know what I mean? It's one of those days. And it actually has like, several of the same characters, but involved in a new story. Now, I will note that you don't necessarily have to have read the 666 Murders to know what's going on in The Cult from Beyond, as it's pretty much, its own thing, like its own story. But I will say that there are kind of like a lot of callbacks and a lot of repeat characters from the earlier book. So to get the full experience, you might want to read both of them, like read 666 Murders first and then read this one. So once again, just like last time, our main protagonist is a private investigator named Randolph Landon. But this time around, his life actually seems to be in a much better place, like at the beginning of the story. So it's 1970, so it's set in 1970. And this is 4 years after the events of the 666 Murders, if you remember. That took place in 1966. So in this one, Randolph and his wife Thelma have reconnected, because remember in the last book they were kind of like on the outs or whatever. Their son Matthew is doing very well, and they actually have another baby on the way, like Thelma is pregnant. Now, they've also just moved out of London and into this, like, really nice, comfortable new house, kind of out in the, I don't think it's out in the sticks, but you know what I mean, like, outside of London. Besides that, Randolph has actually decided to give up the PI game for good, especially after all of that crazy supernatural satanic shit that, like, happened in the previous book, right? You can't blame the guy. He figures the work is too dangerous and he wants to spend more time with his family, especially now that they have another kid on the way, and just kind of have more of a normal existence, I guess. So he's actually even taken a job like fitting carpet, like with a family friend, and finding that he actually enjoys this job quite a bit. Like, it's kind of like physical labor, and he can see it getting done. And like I said, it's not dangerous. But because, this is a novel and it's a PI novel, you just know that this whole placid state of affairs is just not going to last. And sure enough, his old life slowly starts creeping back to haunt him, I guess, is one way. So one day he's out with his family and he notices this older man looking at him like kind of intensely and possibly maybe following him. And that kind of, obviously triggers his PI Spidey senses. So Randolph, after a while, is like, yeah, this dude is like for sure like following me. So he straight up approaches the guy. It's like I said, it's an older guy, so it's not like he can beat him up or anything. So he asks what the deal is, like, why are you following me? And this old man is actually like really flustered that he actually came up. And he's like, the man's name is Norman Parker. And he tells Randolph, he's like, I recognized you from all of the media surrounding, the case that was featured in the 666 Murders, like the serial killer case. So Norman's like, I'm sorry I'm being a creeper and I'm following you around and stuff, but I really need the services of a private investigator, and you have the reputation of being like the best in the country, and I was kind of afraid to like approach you, but I recognized you in the street, so that's why I was looking at you, my bad. So Randolph, even though he feels kind of bad about it, he does tell Norman in no uncertain terms, look, I'm retired from investigative work. I have my family now. I really don't want to endanger myself or them. The old man is just so crestfallen at this news that Randolph is like, well, I'll tell you what, I can't do it, but I have like a bunch of recommendations, like friends and stuff that I'll hook you up with, and they can help you out. And they're almost as good as me. You know what I mean? He doesn't say that, but but he's just like, I recommend them. So you know what I mean? So Norman is kind of like disappointed because he actually did want Randolph to work, but he's like, it's okay, bro. Like, I totally understand. Like, you know, especially after all that crazy shit that happened last time, because everybody knows about that. So he's like, okay, well, so he just kind of accepts like the consolation prize of like these other PI's like phone numbers. However, you just know that that wasn't going to work out either. So it's like none of the other investigators that Randolph recommended are actually available to do the work. Like one of them's out of the country, one of them's on another case, blah, blah, blah. So the old man is just like so distraught and pitiful that Randolph actually starts kind of hemming and hawing about, you know, maybe I should, he's like, I feel really bad. And it's like, I really didn't want to go back and do this again, but maybe I should actually step in and kind of maybe try to get to the bottom of Norman's problem. So Norman's problem is his son, Oliver, who's actually in his 20s, I believe he's like in his late 20s, and has completely disappeared. Now, the police haven't really been much help because Oliver is obviously an adult and can vanish voluntarily if he wants to. That's just how it goes. But Norman is like, look, I know my son. I know that Oliver wouldn't have just taken off without telling me where he was going. Now, compounding the whole misery surrounding this situation is the fact that Norman's wife, obviously also Oliver's mother, has recently passed away. And so Norman feels as though like his kid, like Oliver, is all he has left in the world. And so he's really, really desperate to find him. So after a while, after much soul searching, Randolph agrees to look into the case. Now, he says he refuses payment, and he says, look, I'm not really officially taking your case, okay? I'm just going to have a poke around and see if there's anything that maybe the police might have missed, like regarding Oliver's disappearance, right? And pretty much almost immediately, like when he goes to Norman's house and like has a look around Oliver's room and stuff, he actually does find a clue that the authorities overlooked. On the back of a picture, like Oliver in his room, he has like a picture of his mom, like in a frame, who's like his mom has died, right? And on the back of it, there's like this really weird symbol that's been drawn there. Now, Randolph, because of the last case, like 666 murders, obviously, which kind of like a satanic, like serial killer kind of thing. So he's a little bit gun shy with all these weird symbols. You know what I mean? This doesn't look like a satanic symbol, like overtly, but it is pretty weird. And it's a symbol that he hasn't seen before. So he's just like, oh shit, like not this again. You know what I mean? But he calls up a professor that he knows to see like what the meaning of this symbol could possibly be. Now, at first, the professor can't really identify it because it doesn't really resemble anything that he's ever seen before. Meanwhile, Randolph also has the idea to visit the cemetery where Norman's wife is buried, just on the off chance that Oliver has been there to visit the grave, because Norman said that Oliver and his mom were very close and he was like devastated when she died. And when he does that, when Randolph goes to the cemetery, he actually hits pay dirt. The groundskeeper actually says, yes, I saw Oliver at the graveyard only a few days ago, and he was with this young woman with green hair. Now, remember, like, this is 1970, so somebody with green hair is really going to stick out, you know what I mean? Now, like I said, so luckily for Randolph, a green-haired girl, it's like I said, in 1970, is very distinctive. So he's able to kind of, like, ask around at, like, local pubs and stuff like that, and comes up with several more people that have seen them, like, in the last few days. So, you know, so far so good, it seems. At least Oliver apparently is alive and well, and Norman is actually like relieved that nothing terrible has happened to him. But on the other hand, if Oliver is fine, why hasn't he contacted his dad to at least reassure him that he's okay, right? Because that's not like him. You know, so he's thinking, well, is he maybe being held against his will? Or did Norman do something inadvertently that maybe like drove his son away or something like that? Now, the more Randolph looks into this case, the kind of murkier this whole situation becomes. And it soon becomes clear, and this isn't really a spoiler because the word cult is right there in the title, that Oliver has somehow become mixed up with this weird and possibly sinister sect, which is led by this sort of mysterious man in a white suit. Now, much like the 666 murders, the Cult from Beyond is kind of like an old school detective story with supernatural elements that kind of get a lot more pronounced as the, you know, story unfolds, I guess. Also, like the prior book, the location of the action kind of like moves back and forth from England to another country. 666 Murders was actually England and France. This one is actually England and Ireland. And there's also something of like a conspiracy angle going on, as it turns out that some supposedly trustworthy authority figures end up not being what they seem. And there are also like reappearances of characters, as I mentioned from the previous novel, such as the wealthy hotel mogul, Timothy Andrews. He kind of pops in and out and uses his money and connections to help out in the investigation, because he was like a big part of the first book, and so him and Randolph are like good buddies now. And there's also like a recurring character, this very upright, trustworthy police officer, DCS Kendall Quincy, and he kind of like figures pretty largely into the events, like especially like toward the climax. So The Cult from Beyond actually has more of like a sci-fi slant than the 666 Murders did. Whereas the prior book was more, I kind of think I compared it to movies like The Believers or The First Power or something like that, where it's kind of like a police procedural or like a noir type detective story, but with like satanic elements or like supernatural elements that turn out to be real. This one is kind of more like X-Files meets folk horror kind of vibe is how I would describe it, kind of. Now, because of that, I think I kind of enjoyed the 666 Murders more, because I'm more into, and that's just me because I'm more into like satanic serial killers than, transcendental space, or more of like sci-fi kind of stuff. But this was still like a solid read. I will say though that some of the issues that I had with the previous book are still kind of evident here. And I think I brought some of this up in my last review too. I kind of feel like the tone and dialogue is like very expositional, which I think I mentioned last time. I think there's kind of a tendency for the author to like tell instead of show, you know what I mean, if you know what I'm saying. Because everything is told from the third person perspective of Randolph Landon, who is the main character and like the PI. So there are like several scenes where some compelling shit like happens to one of the other characters, but we only hear about it secondhand, like when that character is telling Randolph what happened. You know what I'm saying? So it might have actually been cool to have the perspective shift from character to character, like as necessary, so that the events could have been described as they happened and been more like action focused and firsthand, rather than just being like long paragraphs of dialogue of someone telling Randolph like what happened, because it ends up like where some of this stuff ends up like it happened off screen, you know what I mean? And you're just seeing like somebody telling somebody else like what happened. I kind of feel like there was still a lot of that, and I saw this in the 666 Murders too, but there was kind of a lot of that unnecessary and this kind of like overly jocular small talk going on between characters. It does seem significantly trimmed this go around. The Cult from Beyond is actually more than 100 pages shorter than the 666 Murders was, and I think that that's to the story's benefit, because it does seem like it's been edited some more. But I still think there were some sequences that probably could have been shortened or removed or whatever, just because it didn't seem to like play into the larger story. One other thing I noticed a little bit was that there were also like a couple of events that happened that seemed like they were setting up something like ominous, but actually were just there for kind of like plot convenience reasons. You know what I mean? Like one example of that kind of stuck out to me, like at one point, Randolph is trying to get hold of Timothy, like his big wealthy friend, over the phone to like ask for some help. Like he needs a plane or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But Timothy doesn't answer the phone for like a day or two. And it seems like this is being built up into something having happened to him, because I'm like, oh shit, like the cult got him or something like that. But really nothing happened to him. It was just, it turned out that he was just busy and couldn't answer his phone, which, you know what I mean? So there was a couple little events like that, and I was like, oh, I thought it was like building up to be, but it wasn't that, you know what I'm saying? But like I said, I mean, these are like pretty minor nitpicks. Overall, I liked this quite a bit, and I was actually interested in the mythology of the cult, which was actually gone into in great detail. So, I mean, if you like detective fiction, like especially set like in a more retro, like I said, this is set in 1970, and it also has kind of like a conspiratorial sci-fi kind of edge to it, then you might actually dig this. Like I said, it's kind of, I would the closest thing I would compare it to is like X-Files meets folk horror, like Irish folk horror kind of thing, but a detective story, you know, if that makes any sense. So if that sounds like something that you would dig, then please check out The Cult from Beyond. The author is a very nice person and has like sent me all of his books, and I think that that's pretty cool. I will eventually get around to reviewing his first novel as well, and I feel really bad that I haven't read it yet, but I will. One day I will get to it, I promise. Like I said, I have this huge like pile. But yeah, I will get to it. But yeah, that'll do it for this Tomes of Terror. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please like, share, comment, and all of that other kind of stuff. And I will see you guys again on the next one. Bye.